Jason sat quietly in the galactic biology classroom, surrounded by students from a dozen different worlds. His human body, lean and muscular from years of training on Earth, seemed so out of place next to the strange, often delicate forms of his alien classmates. But none of them stood out more to him than Lina, the alien girl who sat 2 rows ahead, her shimmering skin catching the dim light of the room. Lina was a Xynian, with 2 glowing eyes and skin that shifted in shades depending on her emotions. Her species was known for their intelligence and curiosity, and today in biology class, that curiosity seemed particularly focused on Jason. Professor Rylax Lina's voice rang out softly but clearly. She raised one of her slender arms, her fingers long and delicate. "Can you explain to us the differences between the human body and our own, particularly specific parts?" Her eyes flicked briefly toward Jason, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of blue, a sign of curiosity and perhaps something more. Jason's heart skipped a beat as he noticed her gaze, lingering a little too long on him, more specifically on his lower body. He shifted uncomfortably, not used to being the subject of alien fascination. The professor, a tall, skeletal figure with translucent skin, turned his head toward Jason with a nod. "Ah, an excellent question, Lina. The human body is indeed quite different from many of the species in our galaxy. Perhaps it's best if we conduct a live demonstration with Jason as our subject." Jason felt a rush of heat to his face as all eyes turned toward him. The professor gestured for him to stand at the front of the room. "If you don't mind," Professor Rylax said with a nod, his tone clinical, as if this was just another routine experiment. "It will provide the class with a more detailed understanding of human anatomy." Jason hesitated, but eventually stood up, the eyes of his classmates, especially Lina, following his every move. He walked to the front, aware of every breath, every step. The room was silent, except for the quiet hum of the advanced scanning equipment being prepared. "Now," Professor Rylax began, "we shall scan Jason's body and display his anatomy for the class." A beam of light washed over Jason, creating a holographic projection of his body. As the professor started explaining the various organs, muscles, and skeletal structure, the class watched intently. Lina, however, seemed particularly interested in the scan as it focused on Jason's pelvic region. "This part," Professor Rylax said, zooming in on the area between Jason's legs, "is unique to human reproduction. The structure and function are different from many species, though there are some similarities." Jason felt his skin crawl under the intensity of Lina's gaze. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on the projection, her skin shimmering a deeper shade of blue. "And what is the biological function of that part?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. Professor Rylax responded with a matter-of-fact tone, explaining the role of the human reproductive system in detail. Jason's cheeks burned with embarrassment as the description unfolded, but Lina remained riveted, her 2 glowing eyes wide with fascination. Once the classroom scan was complete, the professor instructed Jason to follow him to the advanced laboratory for further examination. The students followed, eager to see the next part of the demonstration. Lina, now completely captivated, trailed closely behind Jason, her eyes never leaving him. In the lab, Jason lay down on a sterile platform as the equipment began a full-body scan, mapping every inch of his anatomy. The detailed hologram hovered above him, revealing muscles, bones, and organs in vivid detail. Lina stood closest to the hologram, her eyes drawn again to the human's lower body. "Fascinating," she murmured under her breath, just loud enough for Jason to hear. Her skin shifted to a soft pink, a sign of deep thought mixed with something more. As the scan continued, the professor provided more detailed explanations. Lina, however, was no longer just curious about the biology. She was intrigued by Jason himself, his strength, his resilience, and the way his body was so different from her own species. After the experiment concluded, Jason sat up, relieved to be finished with the public examination. But before he could leave, Lina approached him, her skin now glowing softly in shades of purple and blue, a sign of excitement and emotion. "Jason," she began, her voice softer now, as if they were the only 2 in the room. "You're different, not just physically but in other ways. I've never seen anyone like you." Jason blinked, unsure how to respond. Thanks, he said awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. Lina took a step closer, her eyes searching his face, her gaze more intense than before. I've always been curious about humans, but now. She hesitated, her skin shifting again, this time to a pale pink. I think I'd like to get to know you better. Jason felt his heart race. There was something in her voice, something more than mere curiosity. He smiled nervously. I'd like that too, he replied, unsure of what he was stepping into but unable to deny his own growing interest in the alien girl. The class began to file out, but Lina stayed close to Jason. As they left the lab together, the air between them was charged with a new kind of energy, a mix of scientific curiosity and something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet. As the weeks passed, Lina and Jason spent more time together, studying each other's cultures, species, and eventually their emotions. Lina's curiosity had evolved into something far more profound. She found herself drawn to Jason's strength and vulnerability, fascinated by the differences in their bodies, yes, but also by the emotions that seemed to connect them on a deeper level. One evening, after another long day of experiments and classes, Lina found herself sitting next to Jason, their hands accidentally touching. She looked at him, her two eyes soft, her skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Jason, she whispered, I think. I'm starting to feel something for you. It's strange, but I can't help it. Jason looked back at her, his heart pounding. I feel it too, he admitted, his voice low. You're not like anyone I've ever met. They sat together in silence for a moment, the weight of their growing feelings settling between them. Lina reached out, gently tracing her long fingers along Jason's arm, her touch warm and deliberate. I want to understand more about you, she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and longing. All of you. Jason smiled, feeling the same pull. I think we're just getting started. As they sat together, the atmosphere between them grew more intimate. The soft hum of the Academy's machinery faded into the background, leaving only the quiet exchange of breath between Jason and Lina. She looked at him, her two eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Her skin had shifted from the pale pink of curiosity to a warm lavender hue, a color Jason had come to understand was a sign of deeper emotion. It's strange, Lina said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never felt anything like this before. Not for anyone, especially not for someone so different. Jason's heart raced, and he found himself captivated by her openness. Yeah, I get that, he replied, leaning in slightly. We're from different worlds, different species. But somehow, it doesn't feel that way, does it? Lina smiled, a soft, almost hesitant expression. Her hand, delicate and warm, rested lightly on Jason's arm, tracing the lines of his muscles. No, it doesn't. There's something about you, about humans. It's like you carry this strength, but also a kind of vulnerability. She hesitated, her gaze flickering downward, before continuing. I've read about human emotions, how you can feel so deeply. It's fascinating. Jason chuckled softly, though there was a nervous edge to it. Yeah, emotions can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, but it's part of what makes us who we are. His eyes searched hers, wondering just how far her curiosity extended. What about you? Do you feel the same way? Lina's lavender hue deepened, a sign of her internal struggle. We Xynians feel emotions too, but they're different, more controlled. We don't experience the same intensity that humans do, or at least not in the same way. But right now. Her voice trailed off as she searched for the right words. I'm feeling something very close to what I've read about human emotions. It's stronger than I expected. Jason's hand slowly moved to cover hers, their fingers intertwining. He could feel the warmth of her skin against his, her touch light yet electric. What are you feeling right now, Lina? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She looked up at him, her two eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and something else, something Jason recognized but couldn't quite put into words. I feel drawn to you. I want to understand you better, to understand what it is about humans that makes you so. She hesitated, and then her voice dropped to a softer, almost breathless tone. Irresistible. Jason's breath caught in his throat. The word hung between them, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. He had always felt a pull toward Lina, but now it was undeniable, a force that neither of them could ignore. Before he could respond, the Academy's overhead lights flickered, signaling the end of the evening. The quiet hum of machinery returned as the academy prepared to shut down for the night. Lina blinked, her skin shifting to a pale blue of calm. She looked at Jason and smiled, but this time there was a flicker of nervousness in her expression. "We should head back to our dorms," Lina said softly, though her eyes lingered on his for a moment longer than necessary. "But I'd like to continue this conversation soon. I think there's a lot more I need to learn about humans. About you." Jason stood, feeling a mix of disappointment and anticipation. "Yeah, I'd like that too. There's a lot we don't know about each other," he smiled, his hand lingering on hers for a moment longer before they both stood up. As they walked down the dimly lit corridor of the academy, their footsteps echoing softly, Lina glanced at him. "Jason," she began hesitantly, "are all humans like you? I mean, your body, the way it reacts to emotions and physical sensations." Her eyes darted briefly downward, then back up to his face, her skin flushing with a hint of embarrassment. Jason grinned, sensing where her thoughts were going. "I mean, we're all similar, but everyone's a bit different. What are you really asking, Lina?" He teased gently, trying to ease her discomfort. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. I noticed during the experiment earlier, when they scanned your body, that's certain. Parts of your anatomy are different from mine. I'm curious how it all works." Her lavender hue deepened, signaling that her curiosity was more than just scientific. Jason felt his pulse quicken, both from the directness of her question and the vulnerability behind it. "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "human bodies, especially male and female differences, are, well, complex. I can explain it, but maybe it's better if I show you." His voice dropped to a softer, more serious tone. "If you're comfortable with that," Lina's eyes widened slightly, her skin flickering between shades of curiosity and something warmer. "I think I'd like this," she whispered, stepping a little closer to him. "I want to understand everything about you, Jason. Not just scientifically, but personally." Jason nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle between them. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of her shimmering hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her soft skin. "Then let's take it slow," he whispered. "We have time to figure it all out." Together, the days that followed were filled with quiet moments of discovery. Jason and Lina spent more time together, their conversations becoming more intimate, their curiosity about each other growing into something deeper. One evening, after a particularly long day of experiments in the lab, they found themselves sitting in a quiet corner of the academy's garden, away from the prying eyes of their classmates. The air was cool, the artificial stars above them twinkling softly. Lina leaned against Jason's shoulder, her skin glowing a soft, contented lavender. "I never thought I'd feel this way," she murmured, her voice full of wonder. "About a human of all things," Jason chuckled, resting his hand gently on hers. "I never thought I'd be sitting here with an alien, trying to figure out how all of this works. But I'm glad it's you." Lina tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes shining in the soft light. "Me too," she whispered, and for the first time, she leaned in, pressing her lips softly to his. It was a simple kiss, tentative and filled with the promise of something more. But in that moment, both Jason and Lina knew that they had crossed a threshold. This wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about the bond they were creating, one that transcended species, biology, and everything they had ever known. And as they sat together in the quiet of the academy garden, they knew that their journey was only just beginning. As the weeks passed, Jason and Lina's relationship grew more complex and profound. What had begun as a scientific curiosity was evolving into something far more intimate. They spent countless hours together, both in the lab and outside it, learning not only about each other's species, but about each other as individuals. One evening, they were scheduled to begin a new project assigned by Professor Rylax. It was a high-level research initiative, exploring how various alien species reacted to extreme environments. This time, Jason and Lina were paired together to test their endurance against gravitational shifts, an experiment designed to push their physical limits. "I hope you're ready," Jason teased, leaning back against the lab console as he watched Lina input the final data into the machine. Lina looked up from the console, her two eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. Her skin shimmered with hues of blue, a sign that she was mentally preparing herself. "I've been looking forward to this challenge." Let's see how humans handle it, Jason chuckled, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. You might be surprised. The gravity simulation chamber loomed before them, a sleek, sterile room equipped with advanced technology that could manipulate gravitational forces. It would allow them to experience the crushing weight of high gravity and the lightness of zero-G. As they stepped into the chamber, Lina gave Jason a sideways glance, her skin shifting to a pale lavender, a sign that she was feeling both curious and a bit apprehensive. Do you think we'll really learn something new from this? About each other. Jason shrugged, but his eyes were filled with a similar curiosity. I think there's always more to learn, whether it's about our bodies or other things. Lina's lips curved into a soft smile, and they both took their positions on the raised platforms in the center of the chamber. The machinery around them whirred to life, and a subtle shift in the atmosphere indicated that the experiment had begun. The first phase was simple, gradually increasing gravity until they were both subjected to 4 times their normal planetary weight. Jason grunted as the gravity increased, his muscles straining under the pressure. He could feel his heart working harder, his lungs struggling to expand with each breath. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he remained focused, determined not to falter. Lina, on the other hand, was holding her own, her Xenian physiology designed to withstand more extreme conditions. She moved with greater ease, her long limbs fluid and graceful even under the increasing pressure. Her 2 glowing eyes never left Jason as she observed how he adapted to the harsh conditions. Not bad for a human. Lina remarked, her voice steady, though Jason could see the flicker of admiration in her eyes. Jason managed a breathless chuckle. I'd like to see you handle an Earth endurance run. The gravity continued to intensify, and Jason could feel the toll it was taking on his body. He gritted his teeth, determined to push through. Lina, sensing his struggle, stepped closer, her skin glowing a deeper shade of purple, a sign of both concern and admiration. You're stronger than you look, she murmured, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. Jason smiled through the strain. I have my moments. When the gravity reached its peak, the chamber's systems automatically adjusted, slowly bringing them back to normal levels. Jason collapsed onto the platform, panting, while Lina, although winded, still managed to remain upright. She walked over to him and knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. You did well, she said softly, her skin glowing with a warm lavender hue that Jason had come to recognize as affection. Jason looked up at her, his breath still ragged but his heart pounding for reasons other than exertion. Thanks. I guess I still have a lot to learn about your species. Lina tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes searching his face. And I still have a lot to learn about yours. The next phase of the experiment was a complete reversal. As the machinery adjusted, the gravitational forces within the chamber shifted until they were both floating weightlessly. For Jason, the sensation was disorienting but familiar, having experienced similar training back on Earth. He watched as Lina, too, floated gracefully, her movements smooth and controlled. Her skin shifted to a shimmering silver, reflecting her comfort in the new environment. They floated closer to each other, the space between them closing with each gentle motion. In the weightlessness of the chamber, there were no boundaries, no gravity to hold them apart. Jason reached out, his fingers brushing against Lina's arm. The simple touch, though delicate, sent a jolt of energy through both of them. Lina's eyes locked onto his, glowing softly as her skin shifted to a warm lavender once again. It's strange, she whispered, her voice softer than the hum of the machinery around them. Here, in this place, it feels like. We're closer than ever. Jason nodded, his heart pounding in the weightless silence. Yeah, it's like everything else fades away. They floated together for a long moment, suspended in the quiet of the chamber. It was as if the entire universe had shrunk down to this single point, just the two of them, lost in the void, with nothing but the soft glow of Lina's skin and the steady beat of Jason's heart. After the experiment concluded, Jason and Lina returned to the main lab, their bodies still adjusting to the return of gravity. They stood side by side, their minds racing with the data they had gathered and the emotions that had surfaced during the experiment. As they reviewed the results, Lina's voice broke the silence. Jason. What we felt in there, it wasn't just part of the experiment, was it? Jason looked up, meeting her glowing eyes. No, he admitted quietly. It wasn't Lina's skin shifted to a deep lavender, her emotions now fully on display. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," she said softly, her voice full of wonder. "Not even someone from my own species." Jason's heart raced, and he took a step closer to her. "I've never felt like this either," he said, his voice low. "It's not just curiosity anymore. It's something more." They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something neither of them had fully understood until now. Lina reached out, her hand gently resting on Jason's chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her fingers. "What happens now?" she whispered, her voice filled with both hope and uncertainty. Jason covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and reassuring. "We figure it out." Together, Lina smiled, a soft, radiant expression that made her entire being glow. Together, she echoed, her voice filled with quiet certainty. As the days turned into weeks, Jason and Lina's connection deepened, both personally and scientifically. They continued their experiments, but their focus had shifted from merely studying each other's biology to understanding the emotions that had drawn them together. They spent more time outside the lab, exploring the Academy's gardens, sharing meals, and talking late into the night about their respective worlds. Lina told Jason stories of Xenia, her home planet, describing its vast crystal lakes and towering bioluminescent forests. Jason, in turn, shared tales of Earth, painting pictures of its oceans, mountains, and bustling cities. Their bond, once rooted in scientific curiosity, had blossomed into something far more profound. They had become inseparable, their relationship transcending the boundaries of species, culture, and biology. One evening, as they sat together under the artificial stars of the Academy's garden, Lina leaned against Jason's shoulder, her skin glowing a soft, contented lavender. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds for us?" she asked quietly, her voice full of thought. Jason smiled, resting his hand gently on hers. "I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm ready for it." Lina turned her head to look at him, her two glowing eyes filled with a quiet certainty. "So am I," and as they sat together, surrounded by the vastness of the galaxy and the quiet hum of the Academy, Jason and Lina knew that their journey was only just beginning. Together, they were ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring, knowing that, no matter what, they would always have each other. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.